Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. We are very, very fortunate to have with us Dr. Aiswarya Rao, whose bio is so long that it will take up all of the workshop time. So I'm only going to read the first couple of sentences. But I also want to welcome everybody who is attending this workshop, all of you who are already here, and those who will be coming on behalf of the Network of Women in Media in India and the Shanta Memorial Rehabilitation Centre and Prajnya. So it's just a privilege to be able to put this together. Dr. Aiswarya Rao is a pediatrician by profession.
It started, babe.
She has worked for more than 15 years in the implementation of the HIV/AIDS treatment prevention programs for the Government of India, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. Currently, she is running a shelter for homeless women with disabilities in Chennai with a focus on their access to employment. When she is not working on social causes, she is an avid quilter and a music and film producer. And then I'm scrolling thrice and still not reaching the end of her bio. So what we are going to do is to place it in the chat for you, but you are not supposed to now read it with great focus because we want you to pay attention to what she has to say. And on this note, I will mute myself and take off my video and leave you to enjoy this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swarna, for the gracious introduction, for the kind invitation. I thank all the participants who have joined us.
We just lost you.
Yeah, about today's important session. So the topic that I have been given today is, let me start sharing. I have a presentation. It's a PowerPoint. It has a lot of media in it, and we can what we want to achieve. The topic is reporting violence against persons with disabilities is the topic. And we say, I think specifically why Prajnya gave me not reporting violence against women with disabilities, but persons with disabilities or people with disabilities, is because violence, people with disabilities are more prone to violence than the regular non-disabled population or population without any disabilities. This we know. There are at least 1 billion. Let's start with some of the basics. The enumeration of people with disabilities has always eluded all of us. They say most international documents, the World Bank, the UN have come up with a number. It says 1 billion people in the world have some sort of disability. That is about 15% of the population. Our Indian census 2011 says 2.2% of the population have some kind of a disability. So you see the wide gap in reportage from where is 2.2 and where is 15. So obviously the numbers lie somewhere in between, and we would not be mistaken if we were to err on the higher side. Definitely the 3 crore people living with disability in India, according to the census, is definitely a huge, underestimate of the extent of the problem. That is on one side. Now, why are women with disability more prone to violence? And today, as I was talking to Swarna before the session started, we are going on talking these 6 every year. It's a ritual for us. End of November, beginning of December, we talk about the various observations. 16 days of reminding ourselves about taking stock of the situation, coming up with new resolutions and resolves, plans and strategies, how we can tackle the issue. So in that in that tradition, today also we are having this session, and it gives me great, it gives me a sense of uh, responsibility to transact to you in the next 1 hour to 1.5 hours what my personal experience has been in dealing with this issue, and what takeaways, what lessons I have culled over the years. Every year our understanding improves. Every year with our experience, something new, some new, bulb, some new spotlight is lit, and some more action points. I mean, there's so much to be done, and something more becomes relevant. I will start off simply by saying this. Over the years, we have seen reporting on violence, particularly in the context of women with disabilities, has improved. Every year, almost every once in 10 days, some newspaper, some mainstream newspaper or a mainstream TV channel talks to either me or my colleagues in the disability sector, or the women that I work with, women with other women with disabilities. And definitely the reporters who are talking to us, the journalists talking to us, come with a good amount of sensitization. And so also the stories that are being reported definitely show great deal more, there's better language, there's better focus on the issues. So definitely I will start off by saying it has significantly improved, but more work needs to be done. And another, I'll set the stage. English media has definitely been more responsible. And when it comes to the regional media, intentions may be, bona fide, but definitely the reporting has been wanting. A lot of times the reporting has been cringe or just wrong many times. So we will see some of the examples today. I have, I thought, I always tell stories. I always connect back to, because instinctively, all of us, you as journalists, stories definitely carry more memory, more recall, easier to give the message through a story. So today we will rely on 4 stories, and these are stories that either I have personally come into contact with or interacted with in the past 3 or 4 years, or it's a story that really captured all our collective conscience and imagination. But a lot of the stories are set in the context of either Tamil Nadu or South India. So if you are pan-India, definitely there are numerous examples, numerous stories. But I will rely on 4 major incidents or major stories, and from that we will we will take the this workshop and the training forward. And one more point I want to lay before you is that though the scale of the violence for persons with disabilities is high, especially women with disabilities or persons who identify themselves with or are seen as women, perceived as women, those people's the violence is high. Coverage has seldom been adequate. When you compare the extent of the problem and the coverage, definitely there has been great disparity. So this is the I'm setting the context for the talk, and I will start sharing my presentation now. There are different types of gender violence. All of you have been familiar with this. You know this. There's physical violence, verbal violence. Of course, there's sexual violence. There's socioeconomic violence. There's domestic violence or intimate partner relationship causing violence. And of course, there's psychological violence. So there are so many types of violence, and each of these has several subsets of violence. But a lot of the times, when general public think of violence and gender violence, the number one thing that comes to all of our minds is sexual violence, because of the more shocking nature, the more sensational nature of that violence. A lot of the times there's a disproportionate attention being given to sexual violence, much to the exclusion of the other violences. And there is, to be truthful, there is no big violence and small violence. Every violence, every infringement of right, every every harm, every suffering that anybody goes through on account of simply being of a gender that is different from the gender that has the upper hand or the dominant gender. All these incidents are worth reporting, but somehow we see that sexual violence takes up a lot more eyeballs it gets, especially in this day of visual storytelling and in media, broadcast media. And when you look at all women with disability, there are two aspects of quantifying this violence. One is the proportion of women who are at risk for violence. Almost 80% of all women with disability at some point in their life have reported all of the above kinds of violences or combinations of these violences. But almost all women, I mean, 80 is not a statistically replicated, or there's no study to one particular study that points to this number, but across cultures, across countries, from reports, this has been the uniform trend that has been noticed. And when you come to sexual violence, women with disability face up to 10 times more sexual violence. Later in the presentation, I will show and I will explain, we will discuss why this is so.
Ma'am, can I stop you right there? You're not sharing your presentation just yet.
Yes, I am. Now, is my presentation visible?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Now?
Yep. Yes, now we can.
All right.
Yes, yes.
So I'll start off right now with an incident that happened, that was reported in the press. It happened during the first lockdown. The particular incident happened on 27th June 2020. It happened in Nellore, in the office of the AP Tourism office. Have a look. You saw that incident there. This is in a government office. It is the AP Tourism office. And there are two individuals here. There is a man. He enters the office. And there is the woman who's, thankfully, this episode was captured on CCTV. The incident happened on a Thursday, but 4 days the incident went, though the woman who was assaulted by the senior deputy manager in the office, when he entered the office, he came in without a mask. This was at the almost at the peak of the first wave of COVID, lockdown conditions in the country. And he came in without a mask. So this woman, who is a woman with a locomotor disability, she's seated in a chair there, and she asked him to wear a mask. This infuriated the man so much so that he rushes to her, drags her by her hair, throws her on the ground, and then, I mean, it's a very disturbing scene, and it is completely captured on CCTV camera. So though this woman went and reported about this violence, all the other members in the office have witnessed this, but no action was taken. And therefore, then she went to the police station, and they looked for the footage. Thankfully, the CCTV footage was there, and only when this footage started circulating it was shown on a local TV channel. From there, it got picked up. It went into the the bigger TV channels, and then the man was arrested. So it is extremely satisfying to see this particular report. One, it was disturbing to see the violence, the impunity with which the man he just thinks he can get away with the brutal pulping of the woman colleague, but because it was captured and because of the power of media and how this got reported, he was arrested and justice was served in this particular instant. Now, all of us know that in gender-based violence, there are power dynamics, there are many differentials in power. And in this particular instant, at least there were 3 different power differentials were there. One, the perpetrator was a man and the woman. The person receiving the violence was a woman. They were of different powers. He was a senior official, deputy manager, and this woman was only a contractual employee in the office. The third thing is that person was a man without any disability. He was a non-disabled man, whereas this was a woman with a disability. So this is how violence is always perpetrated. We know that, we know the theory. But this incident, stresses to us how much justice can come back because of good reporting. And one of the good parts, I'll just go back and show to you how this report, the Nellore AP Tourism Office, man beats woman with disability. This story was picked up by many different news agencies. Everyone said, in various different languages, some not acceptable, many acceptable, various ways in which this story was told. But in every story, what I found very satisfying was that the woman was, her story was, they interviewed her. So she was able to tell what happened to her in the first person narrative. In the clip that I showed you, of course, she's not talking. The woman's name is Usha Rani. And in several clips, because once the media started picking up the story, everyone went to her and asked her about her story, and she was able to talk. So really, this was one good story where the woman's point of view, the story was told through the voice of the woman. Okay, now we have seen that women definitely are at high risk for multiple forms of violence. Now, this was a physical violence also, some amount of verbal violence was there. Similarly, children are also, young women are highly vulnerable to violence. Children are very, very, very vulnerable to violence. And we have seen that. We have seen numerous instances. I will come back to another story. And from the same story, how it was differently told by different sections of the media, I hope we can take some lessons from that. Here, I'm playing for you a clip from important mainstream TV channel. This is an incident that happened in July 2018. It was violence perpetrated on an 11 or a 12-year-old young woman, a young child in Chennai, in an apartment complex in Chennai. That's all. So we know this as the incident of the child in an apartment complex and what happened. Listen to what happened and how it was reported. Initial reports, how it was told.
In a shocking incident from Chennai, a 12-year-old was sexually assaulted for the past 7 months in an apartment complex. Now, the minor spoke up about the incident to her mother and sister months after she was given death threats. Now, the parents immediately lodged a police complaint against the accused who worked at the minor's apartment complex. The police is currently investigating the case and has detained 18 people who work in the apartment complex as security staff, lift operators, and those who supply water. 7 men have also been arrested by the police.
So we see this incident. We have many facts around that incident that are reported here. 7 months was the duration in which the child underwent different forms of sexual violence by at least 17 or 18 members of people working in the building, men working in the building, subjecting the child to sexual violence. Now, in this whole story, and the rest of the story, it is a long story here, and I showed you the first bit, but in the whole story, what has not been reported here is that it was a child who had a speech and hearing impairment. Particularly, it was a child with a hearing impairment, and she could speak, but it was not, normal speak. That critical factor, because this story was a very big sensational issue. Several of us in Chennai will remember this case, and at least for 4 or 5 days, this story was there in various newspapers, discussions, debates, and TV channels. But the initial stories that went on, even later on in the thing, they played about the goriness, the shock value of the story, about what happened, who did it, what they did, when they did, how they did it, how her, they took videos and they laced her, they gave her drinks laced with, substances. All those, savory or unsavory details were shared, but a very critical fact in this story that was left out in this particular incident, in this reporting, was that the 11-year-old had a disability. So when journalists write or report instances of violence perpetrated on young women, other women, the minorities, the sexual minorities, or children with disabilities, here are some pointers that will be important for us to keep in mind when such stories or reports are made. One is to be accurate and use the right language. So definitely we will see some more cases, and we will see different, there is absolutely across the world, there is no agreement, no two groups actually agree on the right language. Even in India, there are I went up to North India, and we were in a program with women with disabilities. A lot of the women were very, very happy to be referred to themselves as Divyangjan. In the South, and a lot of persons I know cannot absolutely will be disgusted with that term. So even here there is no agreement. There is differently abled, then the person first, or the impairment first terminology is there. Then in especially differently abled, specially abled, all kinds of terminology are in use. But every newspaper outlet, every house, every media house has its own pointers to language being used. But later on in the presentation, I will give some examples of what can be written and what cannot be written. But suffice it to say that there is no agreement on right language, especially speech and hearing impaired persons with speech and hearing impairment. A lot of them prefer to be called deaf. So there is because of the deaf culture, and that is a preferred deaf terminology for them. However, as journalists, it's important for us to know the different uses and different contextual uses, what is acceptable and not acceptable. Or even if you have you are sticking to a certain terminology, to refer back to terminology that the person wants to be referred to, and mention it there. No, this is a person who calls himself or herself so and so. So that is one good practice to follow. Next is to get the survivor's voice out. and not to victim blame. In the particular case, in this 12-year-old child's story that was reported, in the incident that was reported, what we saw was that not so much victim blaming, but there was a lot of family blaming. The mother was blamed, the parents were blamed. No one knows the real story or important. For example, in this particular case, what happened was that the case was reported to the police, and automatically the case was brought before the child welfare committee. The child welfare committee members went on record to express so much, to express how the family was not cooperating with them, and therefore doubting the story itself, that so this, because of the various dimensions that the story went off into, the story span out of control within that 5 to 1 week time span. But for us as journalists, it is important to where possible, of course, 12-year-old child, we can't present her story. It is not fair to talk to her, or to name her, or to quote her. But definitely in this particular case, the family, if the victim was not blamed, but the family was blamed. Now, the third point, generally when reporting violence, is that talk to experts, talk to other leaders in the field, or activists, or someone who has experience in dealing with this issue. They may not be directly connected to the family, or to the event, or to the crime or the violence, but talk to somebody else who has a fairly deep knowledge and deep expertise in the issue. Always nice to get that perspective. So talk to experts. Every time an incident like this happens and our collective conscience is shaken, this is an opportunity for us to educate the public, because end of the day, this story, if it has no bearing on future prevention, all our 16-day observations, this whole exercise is geared to educate the public, with our focus on preventing or lessening the crime, or to completely to go towards a world where there will be no violence. So definitely there is a opportunity to educate the public. In this instance, definitely what we saw, and I will show you some more stories in this particular incident, how it panned out. Definitely the opportunity to educate the public around, particularly how we talk to children about sexuality, how children should immediately open up to parents or some caregiver, or elder, either at school or at home, about the issue, was lost. A lot of the times we talk to children about good touch and bad touch, about talking and everything, but children with disability and how we communicate to them is still an issue that there's a lot more work to be done. Obviously, a child who has a speech and hearing impairment, there are a lot of challenges in communicating, using the right language to communicate, particularly violence of a sexual nature.
Okay.
So these are four. The final thing that every report ideally should contain is where to include information where survivors can get assistance, where families can go, where individuals who have had violence perpetrated on them, avenues where they can go, who to talk to, or how they can address this issue, either to an organization that's providing these specific specialized services, or a collective that can take this issue and go forward. So ideally, in the case of this 12-year-old child, where was a group had been perpetrating this issue, they just made it up a case where everyone started collectively outraging, rather than how we can address if there were other issues like this, other children were being affected. The next story I will show the same story, how it is being reported, and that will help us to understand what we should not write.
Shocking case from Chennai where an 11-year-old child was raped for months by men who worked in her building, and there you can see all the 17 men were raping this child for a few months before she finally told her sister. Well, there they're being taken for remand in the court, and they're beaten by lawyers. This includes a guard of the building, a lift man, a man who supplied water, and several others. And there's a lot of shock and outrage in Chennai over this case. This young child was unable to tell her family. She was apparently being blackmailed. That a video clip had been made of her, and she was being blackmailed to stay silent.
So again, I've come back to a couple of days later. So when this crime came to be reported and all of the arrests were made, they were brought before the court. So the story right now focuses on incidents that happened in the court, about how the lawyers were beating up, the mayhem that happened in the when the the criminals were produced in court. So we see how this issue, already a sensational issue, has been milked for further sensation. And again, in any of these stories, it is a footnote that the child had a disability. In this particular story, the fact has been missing. Again, they will go on to talk about how videos were made, who were it, and how just stuff that people would love to consume. That is what the report focuses on. What not to write. So this brings us to the question. I mean, what to write and what not to write are almost the same, but I will focus on specific pointers to remember about what not to write. In a case like this, I know there is a lot of competition between various people, where there is pressure on who has the bigger story, who has the story first, and how big is your story, how many details we have. But this was a textbook case for sensationalizing, and when there was a need to sensationalize, they hyper sensationalized this story. So but in a story like this, there is every need not to sensationalize it, but almost all I don't think I saw one debate or one discussion or one story where they didn't sensationalize. There isn't one showcase, and I went through the entire the same incident, how it was reported by different people, and I saw there wasn't a one report to show, this is how I would have written the story. There isn't one. I couldn't find one like that. Again, we said victim blaming. The family was constantly blamed for how did they allow the child to go unsupervised for such a long time. Of course, in this instance, the name of the family was not given, which was a saving grace in all of this, in all of the discussion around the case. Now, coming to two more important issues on how violence in the media should not be represented or put forth, is how everyone, how victims or survivors of violence or persons upon whom violence has been inflicted are always, or many times, portrayed as objects of pity. And there is a great deal of stereotyping that happens. And whether we like it or not, there is a great deal of disability voyeurism happened. in the story, like I told you, there was I will come back to disability voyeurism in a bit later on in the story. But here, disability voyeurism wasn't there, but definitely voyeurism was there in the way the story was told. One more instance of how this particular incident was narrated. Let us come back to see how another news channel, same story, different channel, how they wanted to tell the story.
Well, with that breaking news which is coming in, these visuals that you can see on your screens, these people who are being thrashed black and blue, the 17 of them are the ones who've been accused of raping and sexually harassing a 12-year-old girl. Now they are being thrashed by lawyers at the Mahila court in Chennai. Well, these are the shocking visuals where those who've assaulted now have become the praise. In fact, this girl was assaulted for 7 long months by these men who worked as security guards, as electricians and lift operators in this apartment. In fact, the girl's parents have already filed a police complaint and they've been booked under POSCO and other sections. Well, let's go across to Shilpa. Shilpa, these visuals which are coming in on our screens, no matter how heinous the crime is that they have committed, we cannot endorse or support mob justice.
Well, that's right. One cannot take law into their own hands. And these are the 17 men accused of the gang rape and sexual harassment of a 12-year-old girl in Chennai. They were produced before the Mahila court today and they've been sent to judicial custody till the 31st. But once they were taken out of the court, lawyers were gathered outside the court premises, brutally thrashing
Again, the same story, it has been twisted even more. Imagine the sentence that was uttered by the anchor, where the perpetrators became the prey. So, to the extent, so the angle of the story, I mean, every journalist has prerogative to tell the story as they see fit. Who are we to tell them what to show and what not to show? But to spin this story as an instance of mob justice and to almost show as if we are doing wrong against definitely mob justice is an issue to discuss, but in this context the child upon whom the violence was perpetrated has definitely gone out of the story, and the story has evolved into something else. Again, I want to highlight that even in the rest of in this full story, the child had a disability and that was not picked up anywhere by the reporters. And it is important to show, to even at least mention that the child had a disability, because definitely disability was the reason that the crime went on for such a long time, and crime went on. So many people, perpetrated their crime upon the child. So it was a very crucial, critical element of the story, again missed and heavily sensationalized. I'll come to another incident, this time from Hyderabad. It happened in June 2018. This was a story of, there were twins, two twins with intellectual disability. So the headline goes on to say, unable to bear sister's trauma, uncle kills mentally disabled twins in Hyderabad. So there is video footage also. There is several video stories, but I wanted to show this newspaper headline. I want to read the headline once again. Unable to bear sister's trauma, uncle kills mentally disabled twins in Hyderabad. So we have an image there of the two children. Both of them were killed, smothered, suffocated and strangulated and killed. Now the crime was caught when the uncle then took the dead bodies of both the children from the house and took them into a car. Again, CCTV captured the images, and neighbors also saw. It was reported. Immediately the police came and the culprits were nabbed. So it wasn't a very well planned or well executed crime. and immediately, the family that caused the murders were captured, or at least, the law went after them. But look at the headline again: unable to bear sister's trauma. The wording of the headline somehow seems to, in some tangential way, seem to bring the focus on the family trauma on account of having a couple of children, not one child, but two children, twins with a disability, with intellectual disability, unable to, and the byline, the story goes on to say, the man killed the twins as he was unable to see his sister deal with trauma and hardship of looking after them. Again, story focuses on how the violence was a solution to a terrible situation, a terrible hardship, a terrible trauma. If there are definitely better ways of telling this story, better ways of reporting this violence, but but this particular headline screams, somehow it seems to push the pendulum in favor. Maybe, some people reading the story may even have some sort of sympathy for the family that did this crime, that sort of reporting this headline seems to push. So that is something definitely we can avoid. I'll come to disability voyeurism right now. There has been no person with disability, no celebrity with disability, no star with disability than Stephen Hawking. And I have, since I'm a child, since I was in school, I have been seeing books and stories, essays, articles, videos about Stephen Hawking, about how he struggled with his disability, how he has been, in a chair. He spoke without. This is not particularly. I'm not talking about violence per se. In the context of Stephen Hawking, there was no violence. But I'm putting the story here only, and this slide here, only to show us how popular narrative, at least particularly in the regional languages, has been, when discussing disability, when talking disability, it has always been cringe. Sometimes I wonder whether language itself is inadequate in explaining disability or explaining, the life of persons with disability. Whether this was a discussion I really had with some journalists some time ago, whether Tamil, because I'm located in Chennai, and Tamil, I had a discussion with Tamil journalists. My contention was that the language Tamil itself is inadequate to talk about disability, or we should definitely work on it more to talk about disability in a manner that doesn't, take us on a journey of voyeurism. Just, I want to play a little clip of this, and then you can decide for yourself. Of course, it's in Tamil, but I will, when you see the video, you know where the story is going.
விஞ்ஞானிகளிடையே நீண்ட காலமாக பெரும் விவாத பொருளாக நீடித்து வரும் கருந்துளைகள் பற்றியும் பெருவெடிப்பு காரணங்கள் குறித்தும் பேரண்ட காலவெளி கணக்கீடுகளுக்கும் விடை கண்டுபிடிக்கும் அசாத்தியமான பணியை செய்து முடித்த மாபெரும் சாதனையாளராக அறியப்படுகிறார் ஸ்டீஃபன் ஹாக்கிங். இவை அனைத்தையும் முழுவதுமாக கை கால்கள் உடங்கிவிட்ட நிலையில் திறம்பட செய்து முடித்தார் அவர். 1960களின் இறுதியில் உலகின் தலைசிறந்த கேம்பிரிட்ஜ் பல்கலைக்கழகத்தில் தனது ஆய்வு படிப்பை முடித்த அவர் 1968 அந்த பல்கலைக்கழகத்தின் வானவியல் கழகத்தில் இணைந்து
long story. All of us know the story of Stephen Hawking. This does not need any repetition. But the story, the whole capsule of news or feature on Stephen Hawking dwells, in my opinion, a little too unduly on his disability rather than on the person Stephen Hawking as a scientist and his contribution to our expansion of understanding how the world works and how he pushed the frontiers of physics forward. Rather than that, of course, Stephen Hawking had a disability. It is not a secret. He was in a wheelchair. It was an extremely visible form of disability. He did not hide it. He could not hide it. And all of that is there. Definitely there is a way of explaining that or putting it to the presenting that in a non-voyeuristic way. The reports, not just this report, almost every report on Stephen Hawking that I have seen over the years talks about how he struggles, how his muscles are weak, how he barely gasps for speaking. So all this is told extremely, with great relish by the person who is narrating. But end of the day, we don't present. It's unfair. We should do better by Stephen Hawking. We should present him as a scientist, as someone who has improved our world with his with his contribution, rather than portray him as an exotic creature stuck in a wheelchair. A lot of reportage sticks to this. This is our default. A lot of, as particular, I reiterate again, vernacular media, vernacular journalists go back to portraying people with disabilities as something like this. It is their discomfort with disability, and or either there's extreme discomfort in the language that is shown, or the pendulum tips the other way. Extreme heroism, extreme inspiration. It's over the top. If they did something simple, that is definitely shown as a heroic deed. So we always navigate between the two extremes. The comfortable, the middle way of depicting disability is still an exercise that all of us need to pursue, and it can be done. It really can be done. When it can be successful is when, especially if the journalist is having trouble or unable to get the language right. The simplest way would be to quote an expert, talk to people in the field. That way you really will get a better representation of the issue and of the disability itself. That is my very, very, very simple solution to that. Every time a story is reported, every time an event is something significant comes along, and we want to put it, we want to report it, there are some questions that are worth remembering to ask. At the end of how can I raise awareness is an important question. Why tell the story in the first place? It is the primary purpose of even reporting any violence, particularly of vulnerable people like women with disability, children with disability, is to raise awareness on the issue. So the number one question is, how can I raise awareness? The second thing is the portrayal consistent with the respect for the person? The language we use, the descriptions we give, the instances, the examples we give, are they consistent with the dignity of the person? Are they, fulfilling, or are they impinging on the dignity of the person? Definitely, when it comes to the child, the example we saw, the child with disability who had, the child in the apartment, the family in the apartment, with that horrible incident happening to them. And in the case of Stephen Hawking, a very, very easy example. Definitely all portrayals have somewhere refused to respect the person who is, whose story we are telling. The third thing is to accurately name the disability or the vulnerability. To name the disability, right now disability terminology is quickly evolving and changing. We know that. But to be familiar with at least 2 or 3, the various versions of how the terminology is used in different parts, in different contexts, it is worth remembering that. And also, on account of the disability, what is the vulnerability? What is the result? What is the impact the disability has? And why has this issue, why is this issue important to tell? So these are some questions that we really need to ask in every story. The fourth important thing, and I think that is the most important thing, to link the story to a larger overarching issue or a broad theme, or on the basis of which policy initiative can be better informed. End of the day, after 1 week of media debate, after 1 week in the public imagination and in the public space, something has to change. Something has to be, there has to be a change in either a policy or in the issue itself, in how we approach the issue. So every story, if we can circle back to the issue, it will be really good. And then solutions and strategies, and follow, monitor the progress. Even in all the stories so far, today, what is the case? What happened to the story? The child's case was reported in. The child, the 12-year-old child with the speech and hearing impairment, who had this violence happened, the 18 people that were placed in remand. What happened to the issue today? Were they able to give counseling? Was a verdict pronounced? Did the people get bail? Some of these follow-up, monitoring on the long term, even though we have forgotten the story, it will be nice to revisit these cases in the long term, over a period of time, over every year or every 6 months. It will be nice if reporters, if journalists can go back to stories that they have done and update us about what is happening. And as a result of this, the policy initiatives that happen, or like, for example, we had J-Beam recently. That was a wonderful instance of the J-Beam film by Surya that everyone saw, and it was in the news recently. But an outcome, a very quick outcome of that film was, quickly somebody tagged Kritika about how the journalist from Indian Express, who wrote about how the Irregular tribe children were not getting community certificates, how it was affecting their education. And because because of this movie, again an old report came back to us, and immediately the government took steps to ensure that the community certificates, the issue was again looked more seriously, and there was a they set right the issue. So that sort of a follow-up, especially in violence, it should not be just one-off reporting, but to keep the thread ongoing and to come back to it whenever there is another issue of the similar nature coming up, that we keep the action point alive. That is important. That is how we raise awareness. And even in the story, the story can end on what can be done or what needs to be done, either through the voice of the survivor of the violence or an expert in the field, or the journalist himself or herself can put forth that, if this and this and this can be done, we can inch forward towards justice. I mean, that sort of then only the report becomes really whole and it goes 360 degrees. The next story that I'm going to present to you will explain to us how important it is to really look at the larger issue, even though an individual was at the receiving end of the violence. This incident happened in Kanchipuram on 10th December 2019, just a couple of months before the COVID situation erupted on us. Kanchipuram, it's not even an hour's journey from Chennai. This young woman, Saranya, she's a woman with a disability. She had a disability in the upper arm, one upper arm. And she was working, she's a government servant. She was working in a little office of the agricultural department, a small office where they give out, distribute seeds. So it had rained heavily. There was a lot of water in that area. And originally the story was, this incident was, it came in a Facebook post of some activists, disability activists from Kanchipuram district. Then it was picked up by mainstream media, and then it became, even this issue, then it became, that's how all of us came to know about this. So there was water in the office. Important thing about this office is that though it's a government office and there are women working in the office, apart from Saranya, there are like at least 4 women, other women working in the office. There is no toilet. The government office had no toilet. So every time the men wanted to use the toilet, they just go to the backyard and they relieve themselves against the shrubbery and the compound wall there. But the women, they cross the road and go, because I went and visited this site with a bunch of us. We went on a fact-finding trip. So I know more details about this case, and so I'm able to relate them to you. So Saranya or her female colleagues, if they wanted to use the toilet, they have to cross the road and go over. There is a grandmother, that elderly lady that lives a small house nearby. They go to her, and the grandmother is very sweet, and she opens her toilet. So that's how all the women use the toilets. On that particular day, it had rained. There was a lot of water in front of the office. I mean, the entire compound was submerged with water. Saranya walked across the road, went up to the grandmother's house. The grandmother had gone out, so she had locked the house and she had gone out. So she couldn't use that toilet. So she crossed back the road and came back. And there was this, government toilet, the Swachh Bharat toilet. It was not completed. It was in a state of half, because the government releases the money for the toilets in installments. So once the walls are raised, and they have to show the building to the project officer, then they release. After the second installment is released, then they put the roof. After the roof is put, another installment is disbursed, and then only the doors of the toilet are built. So there was this it wasn't, the toilet is in use, but it is not completely built. So Saranya walked up to this toilet in the slush, and she went, and there was the septic tank. You can see the septic tank picture. It's not a very great picture, but it is it is a picture. So it was covered by a tile. She went and stood on the tile broke, and she went into the septic tank, and immediately she died. This girl died simply because there was no functioning toilet in a government office in 2019, after crores and crores of money has been dispersed. So much of talk about toilets, and we always think the lack of toilets is in some hinterland, in some deep interior recesses of India. We never think in Tamil Nadu, in so close to the city of Chennai, that someone can die because a toilet was, there were no adequate toilet facilities. So she went in. This girl, she had just finished her lunch and she went to the toilet. She fell in the thing, and because she had the disability, that hand, her upper limb is the impaired part of her body, so she couldn't cling on to anything there and come out. So some 1 hour, 2 hours passed and they couldn't find her. Then they went searching for her and she was found dead and floating in the septic tank. So this is her story. Is a good example of how we can is an exactly what I'm talking to you about. How you use, this is a horrible violence, a violence that could have been simply, no one should die in 2019 or 20 or 21 simply because there wasn't a functioning toilet. So this is a story where how can the story be told to raise awareness? How can the story be told to show how especially disability made her vulnerable? If she had not been disabled, maybe she could have, caught on to something and, still climbed out of the septic tank. How we can really link it back to better toilets, better facilities for women working in offices, workplace conditions. There's so much of the story is filled with nuggets that we can cull for informing people about the issue of disability, issue of women, issue of toilets. So much this story can be rendered for to make a better world for everyone, so to speak. So this is exactly what every story, I think we should come back to these questions and in some way answer these questions in every story. Final story. This is a thing, it really tickled my fantasy bone as well. I don't know how many of you remember. It was as like November of last month, November of 2021, the verdict in this case came. Let's just simply call it the Kerala murder by cobra incident. And I will play just a little bit of the clip, but I will tell you what happened, and then we will have a little bit of a discussion here. I'll wrap up the story and I'll explain what happened. There was this couple in Kerala, and there's this young woman who was married to Suraj. He's the man. He what is important in any of the stories, and I went back again and the Kerala snake bite murder, I searched for all references to this story. In most stories, important fact in the story had been left out. The woman who was murdered by the cobra, by the husband using a cobra to murder his wife, the woman and the wife had a learning disability. She was a woman with an intellectual disability, particularly a learning disability. So that was a fact most of the stories missed. So this man, he tried, he got a lot of money from his in-laws to marry this girl. They gave a car and a lot of money and gold and jewel and everything, a grand wedding. and they had a son, a 1-year-old boy, but he was the Suraj, the man, was increasingly unhappy in the marriage. So unable to come out of the marriage. I mean, he could have resorted to divorce or he could have opted out of the marriage, but he chose to kill his wife. So he had been searching a lot over on his phone. He had been doing a lot of research on snakes. First, he got a Russell Viper. Russell Viper, not common in the part of the world where he lives, and he brought it and left it in the first floor of their house. And the Russell Viper actually bit the woman, and she was hospitalized for 52 days, and she came out of it. She was discharged. She didn't die from that snake bite. Then she came home on 22nd April. On 5th or 6th of May, within a week of her coming back, again this time he got hold of a deadly cobra snake, and he left she was sleeping. He gave her some drink laced with some sedative, and she was sleeping. He took the snake and he left it on her bed. The snake refused to bite this woman, because we know snakes do not harm anyone unless they perceive a threat. So this was a sleeping woman, so the snake had no reason to bite the woman. So he took the head of the snake and forcibly two times he inflicted snake bites on the woman, and she died. Next day the parents found that she was killed. Anyway, but the Kerala police did an extremely good investigation on the case, and they had so much of evidence, and they got a lot of they did a perfect prosecution, built up a wonderful case, a watertight case. They did DNA evidence, they did postmortem on the snake, lots of incriminative evidence, testimonies, everything they got. And he was given 2 double life sentences. Now the point I want to stress here is that, again, there is this story. There are many stories, like I told you, but here CNN has done a very beautiful, detailed story on this issue. She died from a snake bite, but the real killer was her husband, and it goes on into complete details of the case has been given about how they used the forensic built up the case. They used models and everything. But again, what only in passing, in very minor passing, they mention that this woman had a intellectual disability. She had a learning disability. That was told only in passing. I think that should have been a very important issue from our standpoint, because the violence, the husband perpetrated the violence and he got away with it. And it was easy for him to twice subject her to snake bites, and some amount of vulnerability was there. A great deal of vulnerability was there because on account of that woman's disability, and that issue has not been highlighted here. Now again, another interesting paragraph, the story goes on to say, they talk about death by snake bite. They go on into giving the extent of the problem, the snake bite issues, how so many people are killed every year. So they talk about snake bite deaths are not rare in India. 1.2 million fatalities from 2000 to 2019 according to WHO. So and most of them are characterized as accidental, but a lot of them could be murders. So that is the direction in which this reporting went. Again, so the journalist of this story wanted to the angle they wanted to focus on is about snake bite and snake bite deaths. But I think an important angle to state, it would have been nice if we were able to go to NCRB data and take out and see how many women with disabilities are subjected to violence by their partners. That would have been a statistic worth also telling along with this. An opportunity missed, a very important opportunity, a very serious issue could have been told. So I think that is the takeaway for me from that whole episode. So we have just 20 more minutes in our presentation. I'll just come to words that you can use and we cannot use. Again, I want to say that there is no uniform, no two groups actually disagree, you agree or disagree. Even I'm not so particular or picky about phraseology and terminology. Broadly, it shouldn't be demeaning or lacking in dignity, but the words itself, particularly for me, personally speaking, I'm not so fixated on terminology. For me, chalega, I mean, because even in Chennai, there are disability groups that do not use Matrithiran. Matrithiran is differently abled. I use person with disability. That is my default terminology. I encourage most people, all my friends, or when I talk to journalists in groups and meetings, all our literature, everywhere we write as person with disability. But if someone were to use differently able, I do not take too much exception to it, because the Tamil Nadu government itself, the department is called Department of Differently Able. So, I mean, we make a point out of it, but I don't dwell too much on it. But wherever possible, it is better for us to be informed about the different words and phraseologies and who wants what words. And broadly, there are words that we should simply not use, and we should be aware about that. So I'll go through this list. Maybe if necessary, I'll leave the presentation with Prajnya, with Swarna, and it can be shared with you. This is an important table that I pulled out these words from different sources. Most of the time, when there is a confusion, just use the word disability and it is okay, rather than impairment, special need, special need, no. Deficit, impairment, again, because when we say impairment and deficit, we're going back to the definition of disability. More and more, disability is not defined as something, as a characteristic of the person. So we don't look at a locomotor disability as an impairment of the person. Disability itself is defined as only an interaction between the person and the environment. So a person who is in a wheelchair is not impaired because they are not able to use their limbs. The person in a wheelchair is impaired because the building was not facilitating the wheelchair to access the building. So it is disabilities is, in all our understanding, the current understanding of all of us working in the disability space, is how a person with disability interacts with the environment. And so therefore impairment, deficit are long gone. We don't resort to those words at all. Again, wheelchair bound, confined to a wheelchair, handicapped, differently abled, lame. Some groups will use cripple, gimp. Those are all used. It's a joke within the sector. People can call themselves that, but when writing in the media, when reporting for a person without a disability to use these words, most of it is not okay. Instead of saying wheelchair bound, to use wheelchair user. Disabled, again, I told you, it is the simplest go-to language. Disabled, it is the most preferred by activists. Persons with disabilities or PWD, always safe. Retarded, feeble, slow, developmental delay, mentally deficient, stupid. Of course, we don't use stupid, dumb, dim-witted, idiot. Thankfully, we are not using those. But again, retarded sometimes creeps up in some literature somewhere. A lot of it is there in our law and the legal, language is still old. So even when reporting that, I think we should put quote unquote or give a quick explanation immediately following the old usage. Instead of using these words, the best words, the appropriate words to use will be person with a developmental disability, person with an intellectual disability, or person with Down syndrome. So a lot of times they just refer to as that Down syndrome person or something like that. So instead of that, person with Down syndrome, intellectually or developmentally disabled will be, appropriate words. Again, in mental health, a lot of words are there: psychotic, mad, crazy, demented, mental, loony, etc., etc. Lunatic very much in in the legal framework, still not changed many of the places, but the right words to use would be psychiatric disability or a person who has been given a psychiatric diagnosis, or a person with mental health issues. Simply when talking about the issues, just use psychosocial disability. Or if there is a specific disability like Asperger's syndrome or something like that, person with so and so specific diagnosis, then don't use person with autism. This is one exception. Just say autistic or neurodivergent. That is, another preferred term. Don't use patient. A lot of people use the word, like they say AIDS patient, like that. This is a patient with multiple sclerosis or something like that. Instead, just refer to them. Most of the time, the easiest would be to refer to them by their name. Say so and so, who has this particular condition or something like that. So use them by their name wherever possible. Of course, we don't use midget. Dwarf is acceptable. Little person is acceptable. Don't say vegetable. Somebody is a vegetable. Say the person has a name. Always refer to the person with the name. Say person or a person in a vegetative state. Some more words, mental asylum, also not a correct word. Just use institute or name of the institute will be a very easy way of coming around this, loony bin, nut house. Of course, we are not using these words anymore, but there may be some vague references somewhere, and best to leave those words out. This is where a lot of confusion comes. A lot of people will write about normal children, or somebody who is normal. I think the whole question of normal itself is being redefined. Or whole, able-bodied, healthy. These are all words which we very, very normally come across, very frequently come across. So instead, non-disabled, person without disability, or the right words, especially when talking about autistic. If there are two children, one is autistic, the other is, instead of non-autistic, to say will be, the word to use will be neurotypical. Deaf and dumb, definitely, not an appropriate word. Hearing impaired also, like I told you, because especially the cohort of people with hearing impairment prefer to call themselves deaf. There is this deaf culture. There is a great deal of pride in deaf. Subset of deaf culture is there. So deaf is a word that's why we have school for deaf, school for blind. So a lot of persons, even the blind, a lot of them will introduce themselves. I know a lot of very big diplomats and people who when they introduce themselves, they just say, I am blind. I am 100% blind. I am deaf. They have no qualms about it. So you can say that this person refers to themselves as deaf, or just talk about, deaf is something. Deaf and mute, definitely no mute. You can describe, this person doesn't communicate verbally or doesn't speak verbally. Don't use high functioning, low functioning. This high, low is arbitrary. Who defines who is high and who is low functioning. So I think so best to leave out this description of functionings out and just say this person is autistic. Keep it simple, keep it clean, or when in doubt, ask the family or ask the person how they would want to be described. Visually impaired, again, I told you, blind or low vision is a very apt terminology. Special needs, not okay. Instead, we talk about reasonable accommodations or modifications. So instead of saying this person has so and so special needs, we can say this person requires this accommodation or requires a wheelchair. Person requires, a certain modification. Then epileptic fit is an old word, not used, not okay. Instead, seizure. The person has a history of seizures, something like that. And the last two things is definitely worth remembering, never to use, is a sufferer or afflicted or stricken. A lot of the old timers, a lot of old, if you take back stories or reports from 10 years back, even 7-8 years back, will have invariably somewhere the sufferer word is applied. So instead, just this person has this disability. Keep it simple.
Of such measures during the pandemic, and I'm happy to say that we have been able to reach out to very large numbers of women.
Excuse me, I think we have a voiceover. I'm just a couple of slides and I'm going to be finished. So sufferer is definitely no way we will use the word. Finally, the one word, almost every reporting has this word. If you do a search of the word victim, it will be the most frequently used word in the context of reporting any issue of persons with disability is victim. So rather than victim, just say survivor. I mean, survivor of sexual violence, survivor of sexual abuse, or rape survivor. So survivor is a word. I want to just finish the presentation on an emphatic, on a good note. So a lot of violence. This is within our circle, we talk about it. Activists know what this means. It is better to be dead than disabled. Means only when issues go to death, when somebody is dead, or when there's a great huge catastrophe or untold magnitude event, only then the media picks up the story and reports it. Only then it is a story worth reporting. But I want to tell you, there are so many issues. Now, in the past 1.5 hours, we looked at not just sexual violence. We looked at verbal violence, physical violence, socio-economic violence, violence at the workplace, violence in the course of, pursuing a livelihood, psychological violence. A lot of violence is like, just absence of access. A person is unable to go to a film theater, unable to visit a temple, or go to the beach, board a bus or something like that. Simple, everyday, common harm, or something that is a barrier for simply on account of being disabled, simply on account of being of a particular gender. If somebody is unable to live life to their fullest, to do what everybody else is supposed to do, that itself is a story, and it needs to be told, and it can be told, and it can become an issue worth pursuing, a story that can have an impact with results in the long term. So I want to, this is an experience from our work, from our shelter. The violence of missing persons is something that we have not we have encountered very much as in the past 5 years, more in the past 2 years. Post-COVID or during COVID, we are seeing a lot more missing persons. This is a story about how a woman was rescued by the railway police. A young woman, 22-year-old young woman, she's speech and hearing impaired, and she just took the wrong train, and she got caught in this network of trains and landed in Chennai. And she was lost. She didn't have money with her, no papers with her, nothing with her. And she was brought to our shelter through the railway police. Every year, they say, according to the NCRB, in 2018 alone, 3.5 lakh people go missing. And out of them, 35%, they say, NCRB says, was trafficked. But a lot of them are not trafficked. They're just lost. Lost because they were disabled. Lost because this young woman had some education, so she was able to give us. She was disoriented and confused, so she was able to write out her name and write out little details. She could write very little details. So with that, we went to the police, and through the police station, she said she showed she was doing she was looking at the news mobile. She used to take our mobiles and start Googling images. So she showed us a picture of Mamata Banerjee. So we knew, she's from West Bengal. So we contacted through the police, we contacted the West Bengal. This is a very miraculous case. It doesn't happen always, but it did happen. And then we got in touch with the West Bengal police. They were able to locate her missing person report filed by her parents, and she was sent home. She was reunited with her family. So it is a good story, but this is an issue. So this is also violence, and this is not on a scale of shock or a sensational or anything like that. But definitely, when you look at the overarching, the larger issue, that 3.5 lakh persons are missing. A lot of them will not be able to tell their name, will not be able to tell where they are from. Forever, such persons are lost. In the last 2 years, we have had 10 such missing persons rescued by us. Out of them, 7 we sent back home. 1 person died, and 2 more we are yet finding out. We are still struggling to find out where they may be from and how we can send them back home or whatever, what to do with them. So again, this is an issue of is a systemic violence. No education for a lot of the women. They don't know how to sign. They have not been therefore lost. So that is a issue I wanted to highlight. And another woman who was lost like that, again far away from home, she was crying. She said, I want to go home. The only clue she was able to, this woman even couldn't write her name or read or write or sign or anything. She only showed Muruga temple. So we showed her pictures of Muruga temple, and then Tirutani temple she identified. So we took her on the way to Tirutani. From there, she was able to recognize the road. So she's in a house. She was able to take her. Once she was on that main road of Arakona, she was able to show the way to her house. So I just want to show a little bit. So, and the only reason this woman wanted to go back home because she had an old mother at home, and no one is there to take care of the old mother. So she was crying, but within a month we were able to locate her and take her back home. So with this, positive story, not always. It's actually very sad because a lot of missing persons don't go home. But this was, again, it was fortunate that we were able to take them back home. But this is also violence. And these are all violence that can be reported, and a lot can be done. For example, the missing persons reporting, the website that reports does not ask the right questions, because It doesn't. It only asks if a person is missing, what language do they speak. There is no.
अगर हम बात
There is
करें
no
कि
provision there. There is no provision
किसी
there.
लड़की की शिक्षा की बात आती है सबसे पहले
Sorry, there is no in the menu. There is no provision for saying this person cannot even sign, does not know any language. What is the name? There is no name. We don't know the name. She is unable. So some tweaks in the the entire structure of how missing persons and how data and information is shared between different states, different departments of missing persons. This is a solid work that can be done if if good reporting is there, if this issue is further investigated. Simple solutions can really lead to a lot of impact in the right way of how this violence is reported. So with this, I come to the end of the presentation. Of course, just wanted, for the completion's sake, there are laws and conventions that govern gender-based violence, and in the context of persons with disabilities, you have the usual UNCRPD is there, the recent Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, the National Trust Act is there, the Mental Healthcare Act is there, the Rehabilitation Council of India Act, and all other laws of the land that are applicable to all citizens are also applicable and can be used effectively for any kind of violence that women with disabilities and persons with disability also face. And it will be important for us to explore, to use these laws for justice. So with this, I conclude this brief training. Obviously, there's so much more issues are there to cover, but I hope the more important issues I have raised, and I leave you again with the 5 cardinal rules for reporting. 1, be accurate, use the right language, give the survivor a voice, don't blame the victim, get an expert opinion, use this opportunity to educate the public, and wherever possible, of course, it goes without saying, there aren't enough services and facilities and information available, but we always need to register that more information is needed. This is an area that is lacking in information, and to once again reinforce that, but always give somewhere, even if there's a little bit of information or a number to an organization or NGO that's doing work, to link it. So with this, thank you for the opportunity. I once again thank Prajnya, I thank Swarna and the team. I thank Nirupani and Miriam and everyone, the women in media, and everyone for this.
Aiswarya, do you have a few minutes for questions?
Yes, will do.
So maybe we can do 10 minutes of Q&A. I see a few things in here. Srividya RK wants to know if there's a list of experts that, I just lost that in the shift, who are persons with disabilities, for media persons to keep handy and reach out to while covering issues. And Manoranjan Panda asks how to educate regional media reporters about issues relating to violence on persons with disabilities. Sometimes they report misleading information. And we will share the PPT because we now have Dr. Rao's permission to do this. The rest of it is your bio. And Asha, in advance, let me ask you, see you here. So when we finish the Q&A, would you like to say a few words at the end? And close this out?
Yes.
All right. So over to you, Aiswarya.
Yes. Is there a first question? I remember now.
There's a question about training with training regional reporters. There is also a request. We will be sharing the PPT. And then the last one is about resource people, a list of resource people for media persons to interview.
Yeah, we can put down a list together, because every area, every city will have its own list of reporters. Maybe I can put down something. I wanted to tell you, instead of just making a list or something like that, no, on social media, on Twitter or on Facebook, it'll be nice if you can follow disability activists or activists working in the field of justice, like Prajnya or one of us. That will be a place, because we are always having conversations there. We are talking to somebody or discussing with somebody. So that is where you can pick up list of experts. But I think it should be okay. We can put together a small list of experts for as when it with regard to regional media persons, and how to educate them or sensitize them on reporting. I think the one prelude or even one step before sensitizing or training is for us to have a watchdog. We're talking about watchdog for films and entertainment and representation in movies and TV and serials and stuff like that. But I think we also need if there is a media watchdog like that, that really picks on disability issues, it'll be nice. Most of the time it's ad hoc, one-off events, something very deliberately jarring or not right, we pick it up. But I think a regular watchdog and a mechanism like once in 6 months or I don't know, some mechanism we can work out. I think it'll be nice. We can work that out. Then with those instances, one-on-one conversations with the persons, a lot of times I have found when something is not right, just having a conversation with the person who wrote it, or writing an email, or having a chat with somebody who got it wrong, a lot of the times it has been effective, because it's also an opportunity for them to understand. They say, we didn't know. They will be very genuinely, they will, a lot of the times in my experience, I have found, unless it's a politician and they wantedly, deliberately went and, said the wrong things. Most of the time people are willing to be educated, willing to know better. So I think a watchdog, chats and informal conversations, and then of course once a month or once a year a training program for media persons in those regional languages will be useful.
I think we should think about putting something like this together. Training of trainers, because also we have a limitation on language, so we can consistently keep training a pool regularly of trainers. That would be good. Rajashri Kanango has a question. Do we have data on human interest stories, that is health, education, livelihood, covered on women with disabilities by Indian media? Violence against persons with disabilities generally comes under crime report and are presented mostly as sensational news items.
Yes. Data is not there, but a lot of human interest stories, especially these days, I have seen a lot of human interest stories. I think we really need to put them all together, a resource center, resource website. A lot of people have done compilations, but I think one more place where we can compile will be useful. Right now, just December 1st, my organizer, our shelter has started a resource center, and I think one of the important things that we will do is have this data on health, education and livelihood related human interest stories. So somebody has, I think a lot is being done. It's in different places, but to pull it all together and put it in one place will be useful as a ready reference.
Would you want to put your Twitter handle in the chat?
Yes, I will.
So that people can follow you. It's actually hard to find you, to tag you. So there you are.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah. And I should tweet more often. I'm just getting into this Twitter rhythm of tweets. Yeah.
But at least, people can tag you and ask you the question and then you'll find it anyway. Any other questions? There are lots of compliments and thank yous in the chat,
So
which,
much.
like your bio, I won't read out. I'll leave it to you to find.
You're very kind, Swarna. Very thank you for session. It was more, it was hard preparing for this because it really, lot of things, we think we know this, we're dealing with it, we're working with this, but to put it together, it was a struggle for me to confront a lot of the issues. I'm glad I had this opportunity.
I'm really glad you came and we got to know you. But now I'm going to hand over to my friend, Dr. Asha Hans, to say a few words and close the session.
Thank you, Swarna, for doing this, and Prajnya and Aishwarya. Thank you so much for. I remember, in 1995, when the first meeting SMRC had with women with disabilities was on media, and I've seen many of the issues still remain. But because there is a population, 75% rural women, for whom, sometimes visual media does not sponsor to their needs. But I've realized during COVID that when we began the first lockdown, there were only 3 or 4 women who used to have mobiles. Now about 98% of them, even in rural areas, do have. So, it was good to hear about how social media, what role it can play in their lives. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it's also a scary thing for people, with disabilities, when they come and they don't know how to deal with it, how to use a Twitter. But, in this 1 month, we found many of the women with disabilities using Zoom, which they never had done so. It's such a transformation that we think that rural women cannot do this, or because their literacy levels are low, but they take like fish to water. So I'm sure most of them will be taking to Twitter, and Swarna can hold a few classes on how this could be done. It will be really helpful. How do you use Instagram? How do you use Twitter? This is something that we really need, and it's something I'm so glad that you could bring up so many of these issues, because we rarely discuss media, very rarely. The only thing we do is complain, but its role, the way it can be handled, the way it's so good to hear all that. Thank you so much, and for taking this, coming to us and speaking. I've heard so much about you, and I look forward to meeting you. And I worked with you earlier. I think you.
Yes,
I
we
don't
have.
know if you remember.
Yes, I do remember, and I worked closely with Reena. We were on a trip together.
Yeah. Okay. But also during the CRPD, we were with you. We asked you, all those. So it's good to have you again with us, and I hope that this will continue now. And Swarna has brought us together. Thank you, Swarna, for all this. It's been such a
I'm
pleasure.
also really delighted, and my head is full of all the things we're going to be doing in the coming 12 months. Asha knows that she and I make plans at the drop of a pin, and we execute the plans also.
And then go crazy out doing it. But
also enjoy. Also enjoy. But Mariam is prompting me to say photo. So turn on your videos.
Okay.
And there are 2 pages of people, Mariam.
Okay.
And of course, tell us when you're done. So,
if everyone could switch their videos on for a group photograph, that would be nice.
Did you see the posters that we did on December 3rd, Aishwarya? I should email them to you.
Yes, I saw some, the orange colored ones, right? No,
No.
I
We did a number of drawings and
Yeah, because the artist is here. That's what reminded me about them.
Srividya.
we
Here
put
she
them up
is.
in
I
Delhi
know.
today.
Right.
Swarna, they are at
Yeah.
our meeting here.
There are some.
I see more cameras turning on now, so I'll take another
One, yeah.
screenshot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for coming.
Until we meet face to face in a better time.
Yes.
I've come to my first meeting face to face after 2 years. So it's scary, but it's good to see friends.
Yes.
Thank you, Aishwarya.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, shall we end the live?
I was earlier on